and welcome to the Building Sciology Poddie, where we talk about better buildings to live and breathe in. My guest today is Ken Long. Ken is the Regional Sustainability Manager at LendLease for Victoria and South Australia, and he is also the chairperson of the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network. I've mentioned before that this industry is full of very passionate people, and Ken Long is definitely one of the best ones. Ken has been absolutely tireless in his commitment to this role at the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, which is a volunteer role, by the way, since 2011, where he was the very first volunteer. This is how I actually met Ken in about 2012. I just came across this great group of people who were talking about sustainability and promoting and educating, and I liked them so much, I even joined the committee for a while, for about 3 years between 2014 and 2017.
Such a special time.
The ASBN is dedicated to promoting sustainability and spreading education, and I really admire the energy that Ken and his team tirelessly give to this mission. So Ken, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Jess.
So let's go back. I like to start at the beginning with my guests. So where did baby Ken decide to get, where did your inspiration come from to go down the path of sustainability?
If we're going that way back to baby Ken, I'm not sure if baby Ken had much inspiration around sustainability. But I guess a little bit more baby-faced Ken. I guess from sustainability in the built environment standpoint, I did go to architecture school, where the focus was a little bit more on pretty pictures, and making some really amazing forms and letting your imagination go wild. And what ended up happening was that I went to an architecture school that actually participated in something called the Solar Decathlon. And the Solar Decathlon was actually around university students designing and building an off-grid home that they would transport down to Washington, D.C. And so it included a bit around high performance design, modular construction and design, and also wherever you could fit in some landscape and I guess like nature-based solutions and stuff like that. So I volunteered some time just like trying to figure out what they were kind of doing. And then they were talking about, integration of solar and heat pumps and all this other kind of stuff. And this was like my first year of architecture school. And I just thought it was really cool. And a lot of it made sense. But in architecture school, especially at that time, they didn't really teach anything about energy efficiency or even thermal comfort. So it was kind of weird, whereas like these extracurricular activities were the ones that were educating me or getting me to be aware that there was even anything of an environmental issue in the world, and that architecture could contribute to some sort of solution. And then a few years later, to make some spare cash, I worked in the architecture library. And what I did, and this is not slacking off, I don't think it's slacking off on the job, but when you have a casual job at a library, you spend a lot of time putting a lot of books back on the shelves. So every single book I'd put back, I'd kind of do a quick look through and read the contents. And the ones that were the most interesting were around solar passive design. And that's how I actually came across Glenn Murcutt, who interestingly is a famous Australian architect. And man, I thought Glenn Murcutt's ideology and approach to design was like, oh, this is awesome. It makes so much sense. You have to really be site specific, take into consideration where the sun is, where the breezes are coming through and all this other kind of stuff. And then I just started incorporating that into my architectural designs. And then that began the rabbit hole of passive design, then, sustainable design, energy efficient design. And yeah, I kind of took the trajectory and ended up just letting that take its own path. So going down the rabbit hole, that kind of graduated into regenerative ecological design. And then that exposes you to, sustainable urbanism. And then when it comes down to all the kind of stuff that we talk about a lot, Jess, is, around thermal comfort, building biology, um, building physics, and all that kind of stuff. It all intertwines into the same sort of focus. But yeah, babyface Ken, less facial hair, more hair on my head. Was still using gel to spike up my hair at that time. Yeah, yeah. I was definitely inspired by Glenn Murcutt, and even though he wasn't the reason why I came to Australia. So,
Yep. So you went to uni in the US or
yep,
college? Is that what they
yeah,
call it over there?
yep. They do call it college.
Yep.
I did a full 5-year degree, and then I was just like, man, I need to. Yeah, graduated at the worst time to get an architecture job, which was
Yeah,
2010.
right.
So yeah, couldn't get any jobs in New York City. Decided to come on Australia, and weirdly, that was one of the best life-defining moments. Still here.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Thank you. Adelaide thanks that decision.
Well, well, yeah, yeah. You almost gotta think. What was the things that led up to the GFC? It was just like ill-advised mortgage brokering in the U.S.
Hey, there's
Just
silver linings. We'll look at the
yeah,
silver
yeah,
linings there. So I find it so interesting that universities don't teach this stuff. They're teaching about form and aesthetics and design and creativity, but they don't teach about the experience of living in those buildings. It, I
yeah,
think it's getting better now, but it just blows me away.
yeah. I would definitely think it's getting a lot better now. Look, I mean, I might be a little bit overly critical of my university, but honestly, I think a lot of there is a big chasm between what is practical building or practical design, against like the artistic side of design, and I, maybe because I'm educated as an architect, I'll never let go of the fact that aesthetics are very important, and there's qualitative aspects of design that are paramount to even how you feel in a space. When we talk about comfort, the physical thermal comfort and air quality and stuff like that. That's one thing, but you feel good with really good design, and color is also a aspect to that, and how you can view outside of the building, and the connections between. Um, but I think architecture school does get fixated a little bit too much on what's on paper. Um, and even explaining it as like what's on paper might be dating me, because I think most architecture and drafting schools these days are all on a computer. So perhaps that's even more kind of like constraining on how they actually view how the space is being used. Um, yeah, because it all, I think, as we know, as we're trying to at least engage with, even people that are, educating themselves about the building industry right now, is that, just as important, is the people that actually use it. How does the built environment affect them, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
I guess in a more meta sense, it's like, how does our built environment then affect people, then affect the way that they interact with their natural environment, and potentially even appreciate and take care of their natural environment. So
mm. Yeah, for sure. Um, so your involvement with the ASBN started pretty much as soon as you got to Australia.
yeah, I still had hair.
You're gonna have to send me a photo of this version of you with hair. I need to see this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good. It's good that we're doing a podcast, so no one can see.
um,
Yeah, I have proof. I have
yeah.
proof that I had hair once. Yes.
Hey, you rock the beard. Yeah, so the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network. I remember when I first met you and we were talking about it, and I said to you, the ASBN stands for Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, and I was so impressed with everything you did. I'm like, this needs to be bigger. This needs to be national. It needs to be the Australian Sustainable Building Network. Like, this just, I, you need a bigger stage.
Indeed. Yep. And
So
you're actually not the only one that kind of says that. Um,
yeah,
and it's probably taken me a really long time to acknowledge the unique forum that the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network actually is. Um,
Yeah.
Even though I am an American, and it's hard to be humble at times, I think that's usually my status quo of trying to keep things like quite humble and reserved. Um, but yeah, the ASBN has always been, at least under my leadership, um, has generally been like from Australia, from South Australia for South Australia.
Mm.
And yeah, a lot of people kind of ask us like, why don't you try to have other chapters in other kind of places and things like that.
Yeah.
But you hinted at it. One of the reasons for that is because it's all generally, for the majority of the life of the ASBN, it's all been volunteer run.
Hmm.
It's only 3 years ago where we finally have cracked enough funding annually to actually pay someone 1 day a week, which is Carrie Reed, our executive director.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's all been on the backs of volunteer hours, and on the backs of volunteer hours, it's very difficult to create an organization that can span all across Australia. Um,
Mm.
but that being said, if anyone wants to do something like ASBN in another city, we actually do have a blueprint, and we won't charge you a franchising fee. So if you want, if you're interested to do something like the ASBN, which is like whole, like it is a humble organization holding space in South Australia for connections and engagement around sustainability in the built environment. So it's laser focused on everything sustainability in relations to our cities, our neighborhoods, big buildings, small buildings, residential buildings, even fit outs and things like that. It might sound broad in that kind of sense, but because it's laser focused on sustainability in the built environment, we just try to make sure that a lot of things interrelate to the different scales of the built environment as well. And I think the unique part of the ASBN, again, that's taken me a very long time to probably truly understand, is that um, we're unique because we're not an industry advocacy group. We kind of play this line between industry and general public. So the ASBN has been a forum that people that don't even work in the built environment they can come to, and that's intentional because we want the public to be able to get this information, and be able to ask questions and almost demand better of the built environment industry, whether it's design or construction or consulting. But on the other hand, we need to get a lot of our um, brothers and sisters in the building industry to come to play, be inspired by best practice, as well as knowing what's the way that they can incorporate best practice into their profession. So it is a meeting place on, I guess you could kind of say, like the periphery of industry and general public,
Mm.
and in a lot of places you don't have a non-for-profit without vested interest playing that part. And I think that's the part that it's like, oh wow, the SBN, um, for as humble of an organization as it is very unique. Um,
It sure is.
yeah, so we try to take that to our advantage. We know we have some limits and things like that, of capacity, but I think with our intention to just be engaging, to have integrity and all this other kind of stuff, I think it resonates with a lot of people, and hoping it still resonates with the people of South Australia, uh, which I think it does. Most people interacting with the ASBN say they really enjoy the content, they enjoy the way that we do things and stuff. So
Yeah, I think so. It's just such a good place uh, to network, to have conversations, and I mean, you just never know where one single conversation can take you, or one meeting might take you, and that group is such a good conduit for those sorts of conversations. Um,
yeah,
Architects go along, consultants, builders, mum and dad homeowners. Yeah, it's got such a broad following. Yeah, I just really like the work that you do.
yeah. very much appreciate it. And I mean, you know, that is as you know, you've been on the inside of the committee and things like that as well. It's all been intentional to try to, you know, cast our net very wide. Um, in one sense, to be able to engage and impact as many people as we can, but the core of sustainability is actually interdisciplinary communication, right?
Yeah.
How can um, how can people in building science, building physics, building biology have like information exchange with people that design buildings and vice versa. Um, and you know, it doesn't even matter if it's like water sensitive urban design, things like that. Even though people are in different specialist areas, they all end up interrelating within a project sphere um, when they can, right? So I think I think that's one of the I think this is another spot where it's getting better in the industry currently, but siloed sustainability practitioners always acknowledge that siloed disciplines don't really create very good holistic solutions. Um,
Mm.
so if we're exposing people across the gamut of various themes of sustainability, it doesn't matter if you're a specialist in one thing. You could be a specialist in PV and things like that, but it would still benefit you to understand building physics and energy efficiency and of building fabric, not just the wires and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
So
that
what kind of event? Yeah.
rounds out everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of communicating with your audiences, what kind of events do you run? I know you've got do you still run the spotlight events? Or did that
Yep.
phase out?
Yeah. Nope.
You still
Nope.
run the yep.
They're just renamed.
Yeah.
um, we we've always run in-person events, and yeah, those in-person events. We used to call them spotlight events, putting a spotlight on a certain theme or case studies. Uh, however, we're our in-person events not only try to bring a um, knowledge share, but they're facilitated in a way so people can actually connect with one another. That whole thing around community and networking. Um, so the way that spotlight events have kind of evolved is to focus a little bit more of the personal experience of being there. Um, so you might remember that spotlight events used to be just like drinks and nibbles and get a presentation, a little bit of Q&A, and then off we go.
Mm-hmm.
Our in-person events have molded to be able to have like presentations, and then we actually have a dinner break. So we actually break bread. People having that experience of connecting with one another. It's actually quite a long networking time. And then once we do that, we'll go into a Q&A. So there is a little bit of get the big ideas out there, let people converse about it over some dinner and drinks, and then we'll go into Q&A, which is actually very some people have teased out a couple of things, and the questions are actually quite incredible where the conversation will actually go. So a little bit more of your time instead of like a quick hour and a half, it becomes like 2 hours. But if we're going to have people come out and donate a bit of their time or invest a bit of their time to come out during the evening, we just want to make sure that they have a really good in-person experience. But at the other end of the spectrum, we also know that engaging with people online is very important, especially from developing community of practice. So we've started since, well, as usual, most organizations would say that COVID has forced online interaction, but that has also been a benefit because we're no longer really limited to the expertise that we can bring into South Australia or is from South Australia. So we're getting a lot of interstate and sometimes international speakers on our webinar series that we call Sustainability. have a good presentation and yarn over a cup of tea or a cuppa, as y'all Australians like to say. Um, so that's been our main forums now.
And the sustainability, they're online webinars. You also do the Sustainable House Day. What do you call it? The Sustainable House Day.
Oh yeah,
Not
yeah.
Pecha Kucha.
We call it the Sustainable House Day Showcase. We can't call it Pecha Kucha. That's
Showcase.
trademark infringement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
So
gonna,
we don't.
no, but the showcase. There's usually a lot of really good feedback from that night. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. No, thanks for bringing that one up. So yeah, that's part of another in person, like one of our physical in person events. Um, Around Australia, Renew hosts the Sustainable House Day weekend, where a bunch of houses open up, sustainable homes open up, and that's all about sharing stories, journeys, approaches, technical solutions, and in-person inspiration, right? But as amazing as Sustainable House Day is, it's really hard to get to a lot of them in one day, right? If you anyone who's done like the Sustainable House Day weekend, they'll try to map out strategically. If I'm going to like the north of Adelaide, how do I get like, 3 or 4 in the north, and then the next day try to go south and get another two, or going through metro. Um, so we try to put a fun event that, is trying to bolster the interest in Sustainable House Day event in person, is that we host these quick fire presentations, um, where people will do a presentation, and then we'll have Q&A and things like that as well. So it allows people that come along to get a quick appreciation of about between 8 to 10 different homes at one time. Maybe that will get them to, it's like, oh, I really want to see that one in person. I want to see that project by Enduro, or this project by Good House, or this other one from like, Suho or whatnot. So there's a lot of different projects that people might be able to get a quick appreciation of and try to go to, or they know they're going to be a bit busy on the Sustainable House Day weekend, and they're still getting the insight of all the houses, uh, but they got to sit. Um, but they were too busy on the weekend because they got to do a lot of family stuff. So yeah, the Sustainable House Day one we run once a year, and always great fun, lots of inspiration. So
Yeah. So it's an event that really get those sort of juices flowing, the thoughts going, and getting people excited
yeah,
about the different designs and different methodologies.
yeah. I mean, that's the whole intention. It's all the events of the ASBN are really meant for inspiration and uh, getting people to at least maybe get like a seed of an idea that hopefully gets implanted and stuff. So
Mm-hmm. So for anyone listening who doesn't know what Sustainable House Day is, I'll just give you a quick cap. Basically, it's a day a year or 2 days a year when anyone who has built a sustainable home registers on the website, and they open it up, and it's like a showcase day where people can come, look through, ask questions, and learn about how that person has built their house, whether it's rammed earth or whether it's I don't know, straw bale homes, or just really good passive solar design, or passive house, or whatever the reason is, whatever their sustainability features are, they can talk about them and educate people on them, and people can really learn a lot and implement those ideas in their own designs. And I'll put a link to the website for Sustainable House Day in the show notes as well, if you are interested in learning more.
yeah, and Renew,
So yeah.
in the lead up to Sustainable House Day, Renew also does a lot of fantastic webinars now. So Sustainable House Day back in the day used to just be always rock up to the house, see what you see. I think Renew's done a fantastic job of programming these national webinar series and things like that. So yeah, Renew continues to be a great national organization to really think about implementing sustainability where you can inside your own house and in your own communities and stuff like that. So yeah, very good resource.
Oh, that's good. Good to know. I'll link that as well. Next question. What are the challenges or barriers that you see in spreading this message further? How can we make it the Australia, apart from being a volunteer organisation, but like, you know, what do you think is stopping people?
I think, you know, in most cases, you would say sort of like general awareness around sustainability. That had, and that's why I've been sort of chairing the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network for quite some time. You know, that is, I do acknowledge that general awareness and I guess nuanced understanding of sustainability can lead to action to it, right? I think one of the things as a sustainability purist that I don't know how to crack as much, and you can let me know, Jess, if you think this is a little bit facetious of me, but and this is not going to be the cost bit, right? Because we all know that as things get uptaked and costs kind of stabilize, costs generally will not become an issue of implementation. But I think for it to really capture the general public, it's like, how do we get sustainability and thermal comfort homes super sexy? And this is the realm of marketing and engagement that I don't know how to crack. Um, and and I think a lot of people might say like that has nothing to do with it, Ken. You know, like if as long as people know why we have to do it and why it's better for investment and all this other kind of stuff, people will kind of get on board and incorporate sustainability attributes. But for someone who's been in sustainability advocacy for going to be going on 15 years pretty soon, you know, like since I've been in Australia, um, I actually don't think knowledge and information on how it uh, improves long-term finances and all this other kind of stuff and investment, all that information is actually already out there, and we've been articulating it for a really long time. If this part of me is like, how do we actually make this a little bit more of a lifestyle that people truly want or are truly going to want to take on board? And again, this might sound a little bit facetious, but like the reason why EVs, electric vehicles and stuff like that are gaining momentum, it's really not the sustainability kind of equation, nor is it always the financial consideration. It's just people think they're cool.
Yeah, I think they're sexy. I agree.
Yeah. And for a really long time, environmental design, like for instance, when I was at my first semester at University of Adelaide, and I did this passive solar design thing for an architecture school. I won't name any names, but I had a architecture lecturer, or the person that was running the studio, that said, "Oh, you have a very well thought out design, and I really get it, but you know what? Sustainability isn't sexy enough for me to really think this is a good design." And at that time, I was like, "How dare you? How dare you say such things? Blasphemy!" Right? Um, but you know, the the Ken with less hair and a little bit of gray in his beard also understands that for sustainability to really get uptaken, a lot of people have to resonate with what it means to potentially their lives. So is it something that they are actually pursuing? So we know we can't get everyone on board from an environmental standpoint. We also know we can't get everyone on board from a future proofing financially. What's the other one that's really going to take the uptake? It's of people associating themselves with, like, this is how you have, I can showcase that I have a well-meaning life, a fulfilling life, and my life will be more fulfilled and sexy with a thermally comfortable, sustainable home.
It's time for a quick sponsor shout out. Today's episode of the Building Sciology Poddie is proudly brought to you by our amazing sponsors, Enduro Builders and ClimateSure. A huge thank you to these incredible businesses for supporting the podcast and helping us spread the word about better buildings to live and breathe in. Your support makes this podcast possible. Please head over to their websites and follow their social pages.
So yeah, maybe we just need a Hemsworth.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know.
Who knows?
I don't know. Have you got his number? I don't have his number.
No, I don't. I don't have Hemsworth. I don't have Hemsworth on a speed dial, but Australia being Australia, someone definitely gotta have it, right?
Right, got to.
But I think even though I do say that in a very jokingly manner, I think it is an opportunity for a lot of us in the sustainability space, or high performance home space, kind of really think about if all the information is actually out there, the real thing around incorporating sustainability will be a little bit more around messaging and engagement. So how can we really think creatively on the engagement piece, so to speak? That's probably something that goes through my mind a lot around it, because in some ways, a lot of the public discourse of sustainability is always intercepted as a too expensive, too much green tape, and it makes it sound like it's a laborious kind of thing. But we also know that anything that is marketed as worthwhile, or things that you want to pursue, and things that, if you obtain it, you have such a better sort of like livelihood and things of that nature, that really resonates in people. And I think that's true of almost any kind of society. So it's really about how do we make sure that sustainability isn't really put on with this coat tag of super laborious. It's always anything going toward in that direction has these positive flow-on effects that should really inspire anyone to try to pursue it. Don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah, no, it does. I try to encourage, when I do blower door tests, I try and encourage my clients to tell their neighbors and their family about it, and and try to like get these dinner table conversations going about, oh, this is what my house got. Are you going to get a blower door test? Comparison.
Yeah, I mean, like,
competition.
Yeah, social. Yeah, like, as much as we want to try to like human psychology sometimes is keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's probably something, right? It's all like, if blower door tests tight, or blower door test and blower door tightness could be something that's like used to be the rose hedge out front. Everyone's trying to get the best rose hedge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
But
already
now
happening.
it's all
builders.
about, it's now it's all about air tightness. Well, air tightness done well,
Yeah.
as you always preach, right? It's like, it's not just about air tightness, it's about airtight and ventilation.
Yeah.
And that needs to be well understood to actually create a very good holistic outcome, and a worthwhile outcome that will make you sexy.
Absolutely. It's already happening amongst the builders. Like some of the Adelaide builders, they're finding out about what that guy got on his blower door test, and they're like, no, we have to do better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I like it.
Yeah.
I like the competition. It's coming out, and and improving outcomes. So it's really
Yeah,
good, and
but
it
hey,
just
if
shines.
neighbors were actually, doing that, then hey, that's a pretty good one as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm.
Food for thought.
Yeah,
I think
indeed.
that was a really good answer, by the way. That was a really good answer.
Thanks. Thanks. I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be like, that's a very small-minded answer, Ken. And not everyone's totally, totally driven by like looks or anything like that. But it's just like,
Oh,
like let's just think about human psychology a little bit.
back to
And
basics.
yeah,
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 yeah. It's how we feel and how cool we are. They're the things that
yes,
matter.
yeah. Social
All right.
pressure. It's
Yeah.
it's incredible.
All right. So, resources for education and learning. So, the Green Book. Tell us all about the Green Book, please, because
Oh,
it's a really good little go-to resource for South Australian businesses in particular.
yeah. And thank you very much for being uh, better at plugging things for the ASBN than I am. It's like, oh yeah, we do that too. Yeah, so the ASBN for a number of years now has been publishing the what we call the Green Book, and this is like a go-to resource for any South Australian based organization that provides solutions for sustainable buildings. So those solutions could be, physical building. It could actually be consulting, which would include designing and things like that. And it could also be providing materials and so on and so forth. There's so many different ways that organizations can provide solutions toward built environments, sustainable built environments. So we try to put this all in a very pretty and well published printed book, which we also have also made online. And look, this is just to be able to be so we can make uh, a quick resource that is easily accessible for anyone in the building industry and or general public to be able to find organizations that inherently know what they're talking about when it comes to sustainability, because there's a lot of organizations, unfortunately, that do a bit of greenwashing with their own services. They might talk about how they do energy efficient buildings or, you know, um, solar passive design, but in actuality, they don't really know much on a holistic standpoint. So then, in one sense, it doesn't, when sustainability also isn't done very well, it can sometimes leave a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouth, which is any kind of service, right? With any kind of service not done well can leave a bitter taste in whoever is seeking those services as well. But the Green Book is chock full of organizations that know sustainability inherently, have had a lot of experience delivering sustainable solutions, so everyone can kind of find them. Um, the the Green Book continues to um, uh, what we first the initial idea of it was to be a lot more public facing, um, because what ended up happening back in the day on ASBN is that via email we would get at least once a week someone from the general public would be like, oh, can you recommend a designer, architect, or builder or engineer to help me with this thing that I want to do around sustainability in my home or even my business and things like that. So like, oh, rather than it's probably more efficient than to rather than answer individual emails to just put a public resource. Um, but what I've also thought now, and you've alluded to this, Jess, is what we totally didn't anticipate was that the Green Book would also be something where a lot of these practitioners in South Australia would look through the Green Book and be like, oh, there was a landscaper here. Oh, there was an insurance consultant and stuff like that as well. I'm going to work with them because they're connected with the ASBN, and they've made an effort to connect with a humble volunteer-run organization um, that tries to have, once again, tries to have integrity with everything that we do. So the business networking of the Green Book has also been a fantastic thing that we're really happy that a lot of architects, builders, engineers, and planners and stuff like that, they all connect even as they become part of like the Green Book community. So I think that's a win. I think that's a win for you know, even though they're you know represented in a resource altogether, that they actually choose to connect, suss each other out, and do business with each other as well, and
Yeah, yeah.
projects.
So it's like a really good referral resource amongst businesses as well with each other.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that wasn't the initial intention. Like I said, the initial intention was to be for the people of South Australia. I mean, businesses have people
Mm.
behind them as well, right? But yeah, that's been the good news stories as well out of the Green Book, was connecting businesses to each other.
But that's really good because, as you were talking about way back in the beginning of this podcast, it's all, you know, these sorts of, like, sustainability is about collaboration between people. And if you're on the same page, you know, if you're trying to work with another business on a project that has sustainability goals and they don't understand the brief, then it's a
Mm.
lot harder. So you work with people who already are in that frame of mind, in that mindset, and it, you know, things just, they just go more smoothly.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it makes
and
sense.
yeah, so people can have more confidence in how they approach things, and yeah, and connecting
Yeah,
with good people that do things. So,
yeah, kind of like a,
hmm.
yeah, being in the Green Book is like a credibility tick.
Well, yeah, we would hope so. We would hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah.
The other kind of thing was uh, we do also know that um, in some ways it's not just about um, holistic kind of thinking, but there's going to be pieces of the puzzle that a lot of people don't really know. So I guess if they see more of the pieces of the puzzle, so to speak, represented in solution providers in the Green Book, they'll be like, oh, I like, for instance, is like, never thought about building wraps. Well, maybe they have to now. It's like
Yeah.
NCC legislated, right? They got to think that, but then they never thought about like this part, or it's like they never thought about the performance tests and things like that, and just kind of getting a small appreciation of what these organizations do. You're like, oh, how does that actually fit into what we do as well, you know, or what we'd want? So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, you don't know what you don't know.
mm,
So that's
yeah,
putting the puzzle pieces together. I like it.
yeah.
Um,
I might take the opportunity, because you did talk about educational resources, is to plug the ASBN's YouTube channel. The Because so alongside running events, we have recorded in video or podcast form pretty much every single event for the past 8 years, which means we have quite an extensive library of how well South Australia does in regards to sustainability. So, you know, these are case studies as well as leadership and things like that. Um, and yeah, we've had all these resources, this knowledge resource out to the general public. Now, I will acknowledge that the ASBN could be much better at trying to promote those kind of resources. But the inside joke, which you've probably heard plenty of times as well, Jess, is like, we're trying to go viral here. Um, so difficult, but no joke. You know, 8 years of content. You know, over 8 years of content. All types of South Australians um, talking about how they have pursued sustainable outcomes on projects and things like that. Yeah, it's a very deep, um, what's it called, hole of knowledge almost. you could definitely do a big deep dive on the ASBN channel.
Go down the YouTube rabbit hole. I like that because South Australia, like, Victoria and New South Wales get all the credit for doing all the good sustainability things. So well done you for creating a library and proving that SA can do it well too.
Oh, SA does so well, you know.
Yeah.
It's a usual thing. South Australians too humble.
Yeah.
Um, says the humble American, right? So,
What changes would you like to see in policy or industry?
uh man, Paul, yeah, that's a very good question because it's quite loaded, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think policy has been moving in the right direction. It's just more around like adoption, right? Um, if I could have one thing on the policy standpoint, it would be a little bit more of as-built certification, especially in the residential sphere. Um, we have all of these verification, like, so again, I'm going to go back to cars, right? But when you purchase a car, you get these guarantee that it's gone through these different kind of tests throughout and throughout. And it's efficient for cars because you make 100,000 forms of that car, and so you only really got to do the performance test probably once. Whereas all these houses are boutique, so you'd have to do like a test for every single one. That being said, a house is how many times more expensive than a car? I mean, unless you're buying these Ferraris all the time. Um, and that amount in investment, I think, warrants the the investor of that house to not only get like an electrical, certificate of completion. They should also get a test that, you know, air tightness testing, all this other kind of stuff. It's like, oh, like we've maximized the potential of this to be a comfortable home that will reduce your cost of living. So then and then that's the parts that kind of like really grinds my gears a lot because everyone talks about affordable housing, but they never really talk about affordable living. They keep on talking about we need to make homes as cheap as possible. But then what's the happy medium of having a house that is delivered and built, at an affordable price point, but then also affords a healthy and affordable lifestyle for people?
And not health,
Um,
not providing health, not sort of causing health problems. Like in that affordable housing space, the mold issues are huge.
yeah, exactly. And you know, um, like, and I think that's the thing around like policy, right? It's a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of policy is passed that is band-aid solutions. It's not necessarily thinking holistically because if you think about how like holistically, you would try to get people moving more for their health, eating better, and being in healthier indoor spaces because we spend so much time in indoor spaces, right? And so that relates directly to planning as well as relating directly to the physical construction and design of built environments. So if you want to reduce the impact or cost of healthcare in this country, um, you want them living in healthier buildings or healthier homes, as well as just quite literally walking more, and moving and eating better food. Um, so there's a little bit of disconnect there on a policy standpoint if you're thinking like holistically, but I also understand how hard it is to do it. But just because something's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't go for it. Um, so that's more of like a policy standpoint. I know there's been so much work on trying to get residential to get to a little bit more of like as built compliant. We're a bit away from that, but fingers crossed that the associations and powers that be, somewhere down the line, come to the party.
I actually did see a video that the HIA put out. Like they're promoting an NCC workshop that they're doing, which I was absolutely mind blown about. Because I just haven't seen much help from the industry associations as this code is changing.
Yeah, and that's also majority of those associations have also stalled this adoption for such a long time as well. So,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna
And they're
hold my
continuing to
breath.
stall it.
Yeah, I won't hold my breath too much around various powers that be and influences on policy to kind of like do what's right for the people. But um, I think I think somewhere down the line it really needs to be like well better if I was going to place some things into policy. If I was someone that worked in policy, um, I'd probably be gunning a little bit more toward that angle. Um, so you know, customers or clients or investors can have a lot more assurance. I think this is a lot all around um, purchasers' assurance that their house is going to help them in the future, right? Rather than being more of a risk for them financially, health wise, yada, yada, yada. Um, standards wise, I think it goes in the same boat. If we had as built assurance, then I think standards of details and things like that would get much better. So, sorry if it sorry if it sounds a little bit like weak sauce of me to kind of punt a little bit on the standards bit. I'll also acknowledge that I'm not too much of a standards kind of guy, but I think if the policy married up to push greater care of how things are built, I think that would kind of go a long way to make sure that it, better standards are actually implemented.
Mm. Yeah, the one thing that keeps coming up again and again is inspections. There's just not enough of them. No one checking.
Yeah.
No one checks,
Yeah,
which
for
is
sure.
why I really like the blower door testing, because it's a number and you can't fudge
Yeah.
it. Mm. Mm.
And you kind of get it, right? Because like on one hand, they again, sustainability gets lumped into it costs more and all this other kind of stuff, right?
Mm.
So they would say, for these sustainability aspects or like better living standards, we would need to have more cost for the actual inspection because how are you going to make that an AI kind of thing? It'd be so difficult to do that for a house. That being said, what's more important? Is it more important to have that inspection for assurance, across the board for everyone? Or is it only for people that really are interested in it, that want to de-risk their investment so then they get these inspections done? Um, so at the moment, everything is, on your own dime. If you want to run a blower door test, or you as a builder want to provide an additional assurance to your client, then you're either adding that to your bill or well, someone's paying for it,
Mm-hmm.
rather than it being across the board.
Yep. Yep. What is the one thing you want people to know? That's my final question. What is the one thing that you want people to know? If you had to squish everything down
This is
into
about
one thing.
sustainability. This is about sustainability, not about life, right?
Oh. Well, hey, it's
Are
broad.
we going like life philosophy or
It's as broad or as narrow as you would like it to be. Ken's life advice. Here we
man.
go.
No one wants my life advice. Yeah. Yeah, you'd be going down the wrong trajectory if you took my life advice. Um, so, uh, one thing you'd like to know.
He's got it.
A lot of us sustainability heads, probably already inherently know this, but um, legitimately, going back to the thing around um, sort of like, performance testing and verification and things of that nature. If a sustainable house or a sustainable home does not have to have all the bells and whistles. However, the more care that was gone into the building of that house. So Like, for instance, you don't have to go crazy on insulation on all the walls or roof or all these other kind of stuff, but your comfort will be much better if you really looked into the details of construction. So, um, the things that you preach about, right? It's like air tightness is really hard when you've already set things up. It needs to, we were joking about a reno that I'm undergoing at the moment and things like that. And when things are constructed poorly, it's so difficult. And um, constructed poorly or detailed poorly isn't only about airtightness, it's also about like thermal bridging and all these
Mm-hmm.
other kind of aspects. Those are some things that you just can't take back, which
Yeah.
is unfortunate. So one thing I want a lot of people to know is that sustainability in actuality should not like, or comfortable homes should not actually really cost more. What it costs is a lot more attention to detail.
Yeah.
So you can have the same specifications, but if you do something about the air gaps and you do something about the thermal bridging, I guarantee you'll have a much better performing house than throwing triple glazing into the house. Um,
100%.
and I'm not doing any favors for the glazing industry by saying that, but it's the truth. It's like I had double glazing that I bought in a house, and then the weak point was the frames, and it infuriated me because I already knew this, but the frames let all the cold and hot into the house. Um, if you if you did things around like how, like, even if you didn't have the most energy efficient air conditioning system, if you if you had a better sealed house, it wouldn't just be going anywhere, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And um and I think the bells and whistles are also kind of important as well because that will help, grade things up. But at a very simple level, I think more people really need to understand that better performing housing really comes down to care of construction and care of detail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, like, I don't know how else to kind of put it because, like,
No, you're right because
in
if you can, building science and building health comes down to controlling heat, air, and moisture. So thermal bridging goes part way to controlling heat. Air tightness is controlling air, and both of them are controlling moisture. So
yeah,
you're 100% right in that controlling thermal bridges and air gaps doesn't have to cost more. It's
yeah,
just knowing what you're intending to do before you do it.
yeah. And this is the kind of things that, like, that we will reinforce that this is so important, right? But I guarantee that laboring about um the care of construction is not sexy, Jess.
No, it's
It's
not
just
sexy.
not
I
sexy.
know.
It's
But
not
how do we?
sexy.
I
So,
know. Thermal
man,
bridging. How do we make thermal bridging sexy?
exactly. It's like um if people knew, people talk about, like, cars in terms of, I don't know, like suspension and all this other kind of stuff, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
no one cares about that unless you're like rev heads. So we're like the
Mm.
rev heads of, of buildings, right? We care about the minute kind of things.
Yeah.
But then that's the things that is almost most important to kind of think about.
Well,
So
you know what's not sexy? Mold is not sexy. Drafts are not sexy.
yeah, exactly. No one wants to pursue a life without, well, maybe they would. Maybe they do, but most people are like, "Oh, I want to eliminate all mold in my life." Um, it's like um and in some ways that's it, it's interesting because, like, as you know, I'm very much one of those people that are on the, I want to focus on, positive impact through design. And then that relates to regenerative design, right? So then that's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of nature-based solutions, biophilic design, and all these other kind of things. Um, but interestingly, I think that's an easier sell from a sexiness standpoint than when you talk about hard dollars investment, it like invest if you invest in those details that that we're making fun of right now because they're not sexy at all. um where could we be, you know it's like, there's a long way for regenerative design to really become part of even the pursuit and things like that. But um you know healthy, comfortable homes is part of a regenerative future as well,
Mm.
where and things. But yeah, sorry for going on a tangent on that one, but yeah.
No. No, you've given some good insights today, Ken. Some good food for thought, and I really appreciate your time. So we'll wrap it up there.
Fingers crossed. Yep. Cool.
Maybe
Sounds good,
we
Jess.
can maybe we can spread the sustainability as sexy message a little bit further somehow.
I know. We'll be on the outlook for sustainability Worth.
Yeah, we want models. Models may apply.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
That is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. There'll be another episode in a fortnight, so if you would like to listen into the types of conversations that I have all the time, please subscribe on your chosen platform. Rate the show, leave a comment, whatever you like, share with your friends and family. I'd love for you to spread the word about the Building Sciology Poddie. There's a link in the episode description where you can head to a landing page, and there are some show notes there with relevant links and a full transcript of the show as well, and also links to my socials. So if you're not already, I'd love for you to follow along there too, as I share lots of building science and building biology tips. There's also a contact page where you can send me an email or even a voice message. So if you've got questions or suggestions or guest ideas, I'd love to hear from you. I want to know what you want to know, so please get in touch with me. Thanks again. I'll be back in 2 weeks. So until then, happy healthy building.